This is the Parents Who Think debate show. Today is episode 3 and the close of our Are We Creating Mollycoddled Kids debate. If this is your first time finding your way to Parents Who Think, to get the full listener experience, you could go listen to episode 1 and 2 of the debate before this one. On the other hand, you might be the kind of person who likes reading the back of a novel first, in which case, keep listening. Here's what we talked about in episodes 1 and 2 in 11 words. Doing everything, spanking, or protecting, our relationship to mollycoddling affects kids. I'm Danusha Malina-Derben. I'm in conversation with 3 parents with self-proclaimed polarising opinions about mollycoddled children. They've shared why they mollycoddle or not. They've also shared why they make sure they don't mollycoddle, and they shared how they coddle and why. It's a complex picture. My guests have sincere hopes for how their children will turn out as adults. These are well thought through ideas turned into family practices. PWT parents in this debate want their children to become well-behaved independent adults, decent human beings, comfortable in their skin, and to get on in life on their own terms. With these goals, children need to be channeled in directions that get them there, or at least give them the best chance to do this. The experiences we choose to do this shaping aren't going to match the ways others do this. Now here's a quick recap from Nicola, Tanya and Rosie from last episode. Then we'll move on to hear these guests get into the if this then that segment and about the one habit they have because of their opinions. I close this debate out by spilling the tea on whether I mollycoddle my own kids and news of the next Parents Who Think debate.
I'm constantly soppy with the younger one, definitely. He's the apple of my eye type thing, and he gets away with anything with that small grin that he does. I do everything for him, to be honest.
We had a whole spanking conversation around the dinner table not too long ago, and they're all of the opinion that they would spank their own kids. The goal of discipline in our home was self-discipline. I would say, look, if you can get yourself under control, then I don't have to control you. I don't really want to control you. I want you to be the kind of human being that can control yourself. So if you can get yourself under control, then I don't need to use a heavy hand.
It's challenging, right? Because every parent will have their own views of what their children should grow up to be, and perhaps as a result, they get mollycoddled because they're trying to make the path as easy as possible to help them get into university or to help them find the path that they need to go on. Whereas for me, that's not, of course, it's on my radar that I want them to do well in life, but I don't have goals for them to go to university. I have goals for them to be comfortable in their own skin and to be able to get on in life.
In episodes 1 and 2, we heard how Tanya believes mollycoddling creates a generation of weak, emotionally immature, anxious, shallow and dependent kids. Rosie questions the standards by which we judge what mollycoddling is, and she reminds us about the needs of neurodiverse children. One-size solutions don't fit all. Nicola shared discomfort that she's changed from not mollycoddling her first 2 to coddling her next 2 kids. She says this is about life changes. She's older, more settled, and resourced. That's a broad synopsis. It doesn't cover the tender nuances that each of my guests shared on this. It'll just have to do. The next segment is a critical one. We often forget to acknowledge to ourselves or admit to others. I call it if this, then that. Because in any strong belief we hold, we've a picture or idea of what the consequences are of allowing something to be or happen. Now, for instance, If we let our 3-year-old eat sweets all the time, they may get teeth decay. The this is eating sweets, and the that, teeth decay. Or if we correct our 11-year-old when they try to swear, they may not swear in our company. The this is correcting their swearing, with the that not hearing them swear when they're with us. Now, there's no guarantees they won't actually swear in other contexts. That's obvious. The essence of this segment is about the consequences of actions, beliefs, or decisions. I asked my guests, if this, then that, about mollycoddled kids. Tell me about if this, then that. So if kids get mollycoddled, what's the that?
I think things will break. Culturally, societally, I think things will break down. Like everybody who fixes something is somebody's child who is either disciplined or not disciplined. Every soldier who serves on a battlefield is someone's child who is either spoiled or disciplined. And so every aspect of our society, from the top to the bottom, is affected by how kids are parented and how they're educated. If we don't discipline our kids with the goal of being self-controlled, they're going to struggle in relationships, jobs, and all of life's difficulties.
Tanya teaches her kids consequences. Discipline is an important theme. Raising kids on a boat brought plenty of opportunities to provide corrections. The this is mollycoddling kids. Tanya's that is a broken society because parents aren't teaching their children self-control. Here she is talking about one of her sons.
With Sam at 18 months, his going on deck and falling in the water was not an option. There was no way we were going to let that kid die. So he got swatted every single time he tried to crawl out of the cockpit. And I swear that was an awful week until he learned, oh, my parents are actually going to spank me every time I try to crawl out of this cockpit. It's no longer worth it. I mean, it was a lot of spanking, but we don't want our kids to fall off the boat and drown either. So I'm going to spank you.
For Tanya, keeping Sam safe involves spanking. That wouldn't be everyone's choice. But in many ways, that's what she's saying. Society is dissolving because discipline is.
If you are the kind of person who is consistent with your consequences, you don't have to use those consequences very often. Like you can say, come here, and they will just come. And then you don't have to escalate it into force. I mean, that's the benefit of, early consistent discipline.
Obedience is a quality Tanya stresses. The expectation of obedience first, questions after.
If you're going to homeschool your kids and live with your kids all the time, you need to like them. And the only way to like them is to have them be well behaved, or at least know how to contain themselves. Or, if they're being unsociable, they need to be able to go find a place where they can collect their emotions. Like in a small space with a lot of people, it's just not an option that everyone would be out of control.
In earlier episodes of this debate, Tanya says how she's more old-fashioned than her parents. I asked Rosie this. So if this, then that. So if you don't mollycoddle, if people are going to say that, yeah? What's the that? What happens if you weren't doing things the way that you're choosing to right now? What would happen?
Honestly, I think I'd be a mess. I think our whole family would be a mess and would be stressed out constantly. It's like, I reflect on this, and I've been listening to some neurodiversity podcasts, and one of the things that came up recently was the need to design your own life. And I've so done that for, the past 15 years. It's like, at first we didn't have a language for it, but now like everyone works from home. So that's, well, not everyone, but so many people work from home now, and it's kind of normalized. But I've been doing that for like 15 years. And I know 100% that if I had to go in to do a job or even work for someone, to be honest, because I've been working for myself for a very long time, it's hard for me personally to do that. I never would have achieved all the things that I have achieved. And just the ability to be able to say no to things and tweak our life and not have to go through the stresses of school and all the time management and all the things that come with that. Honestly, I can just say it's like saved our lives, I would say I'm pretty sure that I would have not survived the real world.
Rosie mentions a whole family to start with. Listen to these 2 questions she asks herself.
A lot of my decision making comes from just asking myself, like, what do I want? What's good for me? And then almost assuming that that will be good for my kids as well.
Here's how I positioned my question to Nicola.
What do you see other parents creating if they do mollycoddle like you?
Mini monsters of self-entitled children that can't think for themselves and don't want to input anything. From my 4 children, I've got 2 that just get on with it, don't think the world owes them a living. And I've got 2 minis that have it all cushy, and we shall see. Ben, he's got quite a good work ethic, to be honest. He doesn't work, obviously, he goes to school, but he's a big part of the rugby team and he has to train 3 times a week. Whereas Michael, he doesn't even do sports. He's just so blasé. He's practically horizontal. That's the one out of the 4 boys I have concerns about, definitely. But, you know, he's going to school, he's in top set for everything, but it's the effort. I have done too much. I've made it far too easy for him growing up. And now he doesn't understand you actually have to put the input in to get the gratification at the end. It's the GCSE mocks coming up. I hope I've just not left it too late to try and drum it into him. You know, pull your finger out and get on with it.
But presumably he doesn't care.
He doesn't actually know. And that's what drives me absolutely insane. He doesn't care. It's like, whatever. And the amount of times I have shouted at him, I have took things off him, you know, because the only thing he does seem to care about is bloody gaming. So, you know, that's the only way I can kind of hurt him. So I have told him, might sound wrong to other people, but I don't really care. I've told him if in 3 weeks these mocks aren't to a certain grade that I expect, the game is going until it improves. I will remove the PlayStation from his room. He won't get it back. I'm sat here now, my arms crossed, and I'm getting cross. Yeah, I don't ask much of him, but I do ask this of him. I've got my job and my duties. That's his job. Get it done. That's all I'm asking of him, really.
Isn't it the case that because you haven't asked much of him, he doesn't give much?
Could be. But he is clear. He knows where I stand on schooling. I expect him to put the effort in. You know, I see his brother flying. So why isn't he doing it? Because he can't be bothered. That's what he says. It's boring. Can't be bothered. Oh, God. It's mad.
I asked Nicola about Chris, her husband.
How was Chris in education? Was he engaged?
No, he wasn't. He would only engage in the topics he liked. And you know what? He actually looks like Chris. That could be the key here.
Yeah.
It's just light bulb moment.
Rosie explains how she deals with problem children. Or is it children with problems?
I don't believe I mollycoddle my kids because I try to treat them in some sense like an adult. Not purely as an adult, as like let them do what they want, but like more in the sense of I'm going to respect you, I'm going to communicate to you, I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to try to understand what's going on in your head and what's troubling you. And I catch myself, I'm not perfect, but every time I just stop for a moment, and if I have an upset child or they're grumpy or something, and I just take a moment to ask them the question in an instance that they're willing to open up to me, and I ask them, what's the problem? Can you tell me what's the problem? What's the issue? And because we have this trust, they're willing to open up to me. And then it gives me understanding to solve the problem. And just like, it's so simple. It's like, talk to your kids, understand your kids, allow your kids to open up so that you can understand what's going on inside their minds. And once you understand that, then you can help them to the next thing that they need to do. Every step is kind of helping them grow. It's a problem to solve together. And that, you know, if that's mollycoddling, then yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it also sounds to me, Rosie, like you're a safe harbour. You have managed to keep communication open and with respect, and that you're a problem-solving partner. So the kids, what you're aiming for is to be able to solve problems with them, not for them. done to them, but with them.
Yeah.
And that builds them in itself. Yeah.
And like we talk things through, it's like they might give me an idea or a solution to a problem, and we'll have this little debate, or I'll perhaps highlight things that they should consider as well and improve upon what I believe that they're trying to work towards. And that within itself is a great skill that school, for example, completely doesn't really address. But I think it's so important for our kids to know that they can take control of their lives and make decisions to try to improve it. And they can do it in a way that there's no shame. And I think maybe mollycoddling there's probably a lot of shame hidden in mollycoddling as well.
Let's sum things up. Tanya sees society crumbling without parents teaching kids self-control, so a blend of adventure in life and discipline shapes her parenthood. She speaks transparently about the ways she instills the traits that produces decent human beings. Nicola is grappling with children who might turn out to be self-entitled people, or mini monsters, as she calls them, because they want things given to them on a plate. She considers what kind of young adults her comfier, settled life might produce. Rosie holds safe space for her kids by crafting a lifestyle that avoids troubling parts of society she doesn't want to contend with herself. Her value for autonomy and defining her own path, including the way she raises her kids, is her foundation. Let's veer into a short neurodiversity exploration because it's important generally, but also it's something 2 of my 3 guests mention. I'm wondering if you have any neurodiverse children.
Definitely, all of my kids are a little weird. I probably myself am in the ADHD spectrum, as is like many of the people of my generation. There are lots and lots of struggles. So neurodiverse, I mean, yeah, like no 2 brains are the same. And there have been many, many struggles, a lot of difficulty with focus and impulsivity, repetitive behaviors, impulse control. I've seen some symptoms that would be troubling in a classroom. And we've been able to, as homeschool parents, give our kids the resources and tools that they need to figure it out. But we never said, you have this disability and, we need to do something about it. It's more like, well, this is who God made you. He doesn't make mistakes, and he's got a job for you to do on this earth. And we're going to help you figure out what that job is. And we're going to give you the tools that you need to do that job, to figure out what your calling is. Our oldest kid, who's a little odd, has like an amazing calmness. When he was little, he talked almost like a robot. And my brother used to make fun of him. He's like, what is wrong with your kid? I'm like, I don't know. We're figuring it out. But he's really calm in emergencies. And he's now going back to school to do his EMT and possibly paramedic. He is going to be amazing. As an ambulance driver or as someone who has to deal with someone in an emergency on the boat, if anyone was bleeding or if there was some kind of medical, he's the kid that you call like, hey, could you please go get me the bandages? And he'd come in the kitchen and I was like bleeding all over the place. He's the one that you would call. So if he is on the autism spectrum disorder, which we suspect that he is that a disability or a superpower? I think it really depends on how you frame it. And we didn't pigeonhole any of our kids. And I think that's another way that kids get mollycoddled is if they get a label and then excuses get made for them. So we didn't want any of our kids to adopt a victim mentality.
I'm going to sit for a moment with the idea of excuses being made for neurodiverse children. I'm working out my role here as a host, as neutral voice, or not neutral. As this podcast unfolds, I'll find what's what. For now, as a mother of neurodiverse children, I see accommodations and kindness as important. I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's Rosie.
Society pushes you to be someone, be a certain way. It's easy to feel embarrassed to do things differently, or you feel the pressure to be like other people. And when you can't, people can easily close down or feel shame that they're not able to be like others expect them to be. There's shame in society when your kids aren't normal, whatever normal is. I can't prove it, but I'm 100% convinced that we'd all be so worse off if we couldn't mollycoddle them, if we couldn't give them the flexibility. I see that a lot in the home education world, that actually the kids are refusing to go, or the kids are full of stress, and the impact of that, it's devastating to see. And like my whole goal is to basically avoid that, because dealing with stressed kids is really not a great place to be. Like we worry enough about our kids, right? And seeing home education stories of parents taking their kids out of school, but also the mental health challenges that go with it, and like the school's not listening, or needing to go through months and months of processes that actually don't achieve anything, and throughout that whole time your kid is suffering. Yeah, I'd rather mollycoddle than let them go through all of that. It's devastating. It really is.
And that brings us to the next segment. What's the one habit guests have because of their opinion on this topic? Our beliefs influence our behaviour and determine our actions. What habits come from my guests' beliefs? So because of your opinions on mollycoddling, what's the one habit you have?
Do you mean the way I just pamper to all the whims? I just crack on with it because it makes my life easier.
Exactly. That's probably the overarching habit that you've got. You get on with it because it makes your life easier.
Yeah, that is it. I know it's done then, don't I?
Yeah,
I don't have to sit there wondering when it's going to be done, festering, winding myself up.
Yep, absolutely.
That is why I mollycoddle. 100%.
Nicola's habit is pampering to her younger boy's whims because it makes her life easier. Things get done because she's doing them. When I asked Tanya what her one habit is because of her opinion on mollycoddling, she was already prepped.
I actually thought about this ahead of time because I knew that there were going to be lots of choices and I wanted to boil it down. I chose the mistake protocol. And I tested my daughter the other day because I asked her, I'm like, well, what do you do when you make a mistake? Because I wanted to know if she had really absorbed this habit that our family has. And she told me what she would do if she made a mistake. And she nailed it. So I'm like, okay, this is one habit that we have really formed as a family. It's the mistake protocol.
The mistake protocol. Tanya explains.
What do you do when you make a mistake? The first thing you do is admit it. So you're taking responsibility for something. Then you apologize. You know, if you've hurt somebody in the process of this mistake, you apologize for the wrong thing that you did. Then you try to make it right. And then finally, you learn from it. If you're really lucky, you can look back on it and laugh. So that would be like the fifth step in the mistake protocol.
That would be great.
And laugh about your mistake. Sometimes at the time, you're not laughing.
What does this mistake protocol habit result in?
But it raises kids that take responsibility for their own behavior, that are compassionate enough to recognize that their behavior had an effect on another human being, and with the good character to try and fix the problem, you know, that maybe they created. And then again, if they're smart and don't have to learn from the same mistake over and over again, hopefully, you know, they learn not to make that mistake, then go make a new one.
I guess the one habit that I have from a practical perspective is that I don't make decisions on the spot. And a phrase that I use is, I'm a slow thinker. So I use that phrase quite a lot. I use it as a way to get out of meetings as well and not make decisions on the spot.
I have a feeling Rosie is about to upend our ideas about something.
I've had comments about it as well. Like this one time I tried to work for another company and I just didn't last very long there. But like being on a call and I would say, I'll get back to you about that. I need to think about that. And I would get like these strange looks. I said, you know, they want to answer now. But I think in life, people want answers now, and society finds it hard to not get answers on the spot.
She's going to apply this to her kids, isn't she?
You know, I see myself taking that angle with my kids. I'm not going to demand solutions straight away. I'm not going to try to talk to my kids when they're upset. I'm not going to expect a solution on the spot. But that doesn't mean I'm going to forget about it. It's more like, let's be slow in thinking about this. Let's process it. Let's all give each other time to talk about it when the time is right. And quite often, if it's a small thing, it could be the next day we talk about it and I'll raise it and I'll say, oh, you know, that thing that happened yesterday, what was that about? Why did that, you know, was it, you know, I'll say, did I do something? Was there something bothering you? Were you actually upset? And just having that healthy conversation about it to open it up and try to understand basically what's going on.
Here's the twist.
Or for us as parents to actually say, oh, I'm sorry I said this, or I'm sorry I got upset, I shouldn't have got upset. So the chance for us as parents to say, we were stressed in that moment, I'm sorry I spoke to you like that, or, stuff like that.
Rosie sees this as chance for parents to come to children. The one doing the understanding is the parent, rather than children understanding mistakes they've made or are making.
I guess I call that slow thinking in general terms, but that whole approach of we don't have to have a culture of talking about it now. But to me, it feels so right. It's like, I'm upset. I don't want to talk now. You're not going to get anything out of me right now, but maybe in a few days, I can have the energy to address it. But right now, no, there's no chance you're going to get anything out of me. I've shut down, or I need time to think. And I definitely feel that when we have time to think, at least for me, then we come up with better solutions or different solutions, or we think of different things when we give it a bit of time for the dust to settle. I think that's a great tip for any parent is we don't need to solve everything straight away.
Let's return to Nicola.
If you could look back and you think about the one habit you had with the bigger ones, the older ones, I know it's hard because you're not there anymore, but God, you were there for years. What's the one habit you might have had then?
I would tell them straight if I was annoyed with what they'd done, or if they'd not done something I'd asked, they would do it because I would tell them. Whereas now I don't, do I?
No, doesn't sound like you
God,
do.
younger me was feistier.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've lost the feisty.
Yeah, she stood up for herself.
Yes, I think that was because I was on my own though as well, definitely. And what I was doing in my life with the degree and things, bringing them up. But yeah, no, I was definitely more feistier then, and I would tell people straight, get it done. Whereas now I've chilled, I've matured, I've got a husband, so I'm a bit more chilled. I've got someone to lean on, share the responsibilities.
My guests have such different habits. They match up perfectly with their opinions about mollycoddling. We know Nicola does everything. Rosie uses slow thinking to breed communication and solve problems, not knee-jerking into conversation and action. Tanya instills the 5-step mistake protocol into her kids. I was interested in hearing what kind of adults Nicola imagines she's creating with her younger two. So I asked her,
what kind of adults do you think you're creating with these two smaller ones, the younger ones?
So Mikey is going to be a self-entitled man who expects a lot from little input. I can see that now. That is what he's like as a teenager. Hopefully he will grow out of that, but possibly not because it's been ingrained. Ben, on the other hand, he's not like Michael, even though he gets a lot. He's very thankful and grateful for what he gets and the relationship me and him have. And he knows how to respect me, and he's grateful for everything he has. And I just hope, he'll be the same. He does say, with regards to mine and Chris's relationship, how loving we are. I'm going to be just like you and Dad when I have a wife. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice to know. So I'm just hoping he don't turn out like Mikey. That's really bad to say, but yeah, Michael is a total spoiled brat, and he does think the world owes him everything, and he doesn't have to do anything for it, and that's our fault. Yeah, it's hard for me to say that, but it is, I said to him last week, you're going to have a shock when you are thrown out into the big world and mummy, daddy isn't doing everything for you. It's going to be a massive learning curve.
What will he struggle with?
Everything. He will struggle.
In episode 1, I dished the dirt on my relationship with being mollycoddled. Or as it happens, not much. I promised I'd circle back in this episode and say what my relationship to mollycoddling my own 10 kids is in the last words segment. Here we are. I thought my adopted parents were well-intentioned, but pedantic and old-fashioned. That wasn't an odd observation, since generationally they were as old, if not older, than my peers' grandparents. Because of my mother's upbringing, I inherited a value for manners from her because she banged on about them like they're a holy grail. She also instilled the word backbone in my mind, that showing up was important and that I must do what I say I'll do. There was more fervour for doing the right thing than compassion in our family home. As a teen mother trying to prove I'd not wrecked my life, and quickly after that carving out my career, I'm not sure I gave too much thought to mollycoddling or what kind of adults my kids would be. I was juggling so much that keeping the balls up in the air was my goal. I propelled myself forward in surviving mode, in a cycle of feed kids, clothe them, make sure they're happy and safe, pay the bills, questioning are they doing okay at school, keeping them entertained, and then making happy memories where we could, and obviously showing them love. I was thriving in small, precious moments of laughter and of getting through the roller coaster of daily life together. But with my first 5 kids, I didn't agonise over parenting them like we've become expected to now. As societal changes in the way we see mothering shifted from what some call benign neglect to an intensified perfect mother model, the question of mollycoddling for me began to feel like a KPI of modern parenthood, a key performance indicator that provides me with targets to shoot for, milestones to gauge progress by, and insights that more generally help mothers and fathers across families make better decisions. How exhausting all this feels. I didn't and don't see myself as a professional parent. Or maybe it's more a professionalisation of the role of parent. But is it really motherhood? I'm not a professional mother. I'm a mum of 10 brilliant souls. I've changed how I treat my kids as I've grown and as I've made mistakes with them. Like the liberal way, I assumed my sons would be safe in their teen weekend jobs. I'm talking safe from predatory adults. Except years later, I discovered that my lack of mollycoddling meant one of them endured experiences he had no idea how to deal with. And this issue of safety is a great example of something I've since learned comes with the privileges of being a white mother. I didn't adequately talk to my sons about the intentions of some adults. And I do mean adequately. That's on me, and I regret this. I couldn't know what I didn't understand. But that doesn't help, does it? I've also not had to have the talk that so many black and brown parents must have with their sons and daughters. I'm aware that mainstream stories of mollycoddling, helicopter-style parents focus on well-off white mothers, whisking kids from rehearsals to extracurricular things, whereas black parents have to practice a different type of protectiveness. Many of these parents feel this is the only way to keep their kids safe in the face of systemic oppression. As a white mother, I've been at choice about mollycoddling. In other words, I felt I had the luxury, to some extent, to take my eye off the ball. Not from the welfare of my kids, but in the choices about how much to coddle, when to coddle, and how to do this. Do I mollycoddle my kids? I don't mollycoddle, and I don't want to. Here's why. Truth is, I'm pretty old-fashioned. I'm not sure who I'm comparing myself with, but I sense these things. To become independent adults, I feel my children must experience adversity, not intentionally created hardship for the sake of it, but it's not my job to treat them as fragile. I see my children as resilient, and so my parenting is guided by that. I'll cover neurodiverse needs separately because that changes things. Now take the trend for adults to want to be kids for longer and longer. When I hear 33-year-olds and 43-year-olds say how young they are, I try to stop myself from pushing back. Expecting little of ourselves doesn't necessarily breed optimal mental health or self-worth. I want my kids to be content and to thrive. My role is to build their independence, and that's about life skills. My job starts right away. I know that each time, for instance, my babies stopped breastfeeding was exciting, yet marked a poignant move onwards. I cried each time, but also whooped a little. Each milestone towards living independently is my job done. I'm trying hard to equip my kids with the basics to go out into the world. Am I ambitious on their behalf? Nope, I'm not. I concentrate on building my own ambitions as a professional, rather than living through my children. So I have neither mollycoddled them to stay babies, or pushed them to follow paths that are more about me than them. I see overprotecting children as disadvantaging them, except that I have mollycoddled them in ways that my parents didn't shelter me. I'm sure future generations in my family will do better. I really hope so. Now let's get a little specific. Have I loaned children money? Yes, I have. Have I sorted things for and with them? Of course, it would be odd if I hadn't. But I want to share something domestic. This is about when I ask my children to do hoovering. I don't say, "Can you do the hoovering for me?" If I did that, it would mean the hoovering is owned by me, which is not the case. The hoovering is a task for the family, so here's what I say instead. Can you do the hoovering for us, for the family? If one of my kids hoovers, it's for the family, not for me. This is a subtle but important difference. I've older, left-home kids. Now, do I see them as needing their mummy because they can't stand on their own 2 feet? No. In my world, that would mean I'd failed to do my most important job. I've also got young children too. Now, they aren't independent yet. But I've never felt my job is to be best pals with my kids, although I secretly hope we are, of course. My job is to be a guardian, a mentor, someone who objectively holds space for them to flourish. And of course, to love them, even when they're showing up as not especially lovable. But that's too much of a broad brush take on things because my children aren't all starting from the same place. Part of the privilege of being their mother is to respond to the talents they have and to the challenges they also experience. Each has battles. That's part of being human. And at some point, each needs to face their own battles. But my job is to be a supporter and to help them onto their feet, not to hinder them by over-coddling them. The distinction I make is that advocating for my children, all of my children, is not mollycoddling. Advocating for my neurodiverse children is all about fighting to protect them from disadvantages that mean they can't access resources and opportunities without my help. These children are vulnerable in ways neurotypical children aren't. So the term mollycoddling holds different meanings for families with neurodiverse kids. I'd say that mollycoddling doesn't even come into our lives. My mothering isn't just about raising my kids. It's not just about making sure people are alive. It's also about making sure that their spirits are intact, that their souls are intact, that they're finding joy. But my biggest job is to be an advocate. This is not mollycoddling. It's straight up parenting. What my three guests and I show is how we're reshaping family dynamics generation by generation. It's one thing knowing this, and another hearing about it from the inside of people's heads and hearts. Also, that mollycoddling to one person is parenting as usual for another. Now, digging deeper for context is something lots of us don't do when we label someone as one of those mollycoddlers or someone who's a bad parent because they don't protect their kids enough. What did you learn by hearing four parents tell you about our relationship to mollycoddling? Did this debate make you think about your own upbringing and how you raise or will raise kids? Let's close this mollycoddling debate with some final words from my wonderful guests, Nicola, Tanya, and Rosie.
How much have you become your mother?
Oh, I don't think at all.
Well, in terms of protection.
In terms of protection. So, yeah, I am protecting now, like my mum, but not on par. So where my mum was overbearing and it wasn't wanted on my part, Ben loves me going in the room and giving him a cuddle and a kiss. You know, we had trouble with Michael not so long ago. Some boys were bullying in him. Oh gosh, and I suppose I did go all in 100%, and I tackled these boys head on. True Mancunian style, I terrified them. And he's not been bullied since. So yeah, I am a protective mother when it comes to things like that. But I'm not like my mum. I'm not having arguments with my children because I'm too overbearing or I'm too overprotective. I think I've just got the right amount of protectiveness and nurturing going on.
Actually, the perfect analogy that I've ever found is like a playground built on the edge of a cliff. If you don't have a fence around that cliff, kids will stay really far away. You're not going to play ball right up to the edge of the cliff because your ball will go over the cliff. Now, why there's a playground on the edge of a cliff, I don't know. But in that analogy, if you build a fence along that cliff edge where the drop-off is, kids will play right up to the edge of the drop-off. You know, they're not worried that their ball is going to go over the edge. And they, you know, it actually expands the space in which they feel safe to play. So for us, setting those boundaries on behavior was the fence of the drop-off, and it allowed our kids actually more freedom within those boundaries. I think that's one of the things that people don't understand about authority is that it is a fence, but within that fence, you're actually afforded more freedom.
It's like, oh my God, we don't have to get up and go to school. We don't have to have a schedule. We don't have to sit on meetings all day. I can design my business to fit around my kids' unschooling or home education needs. Oh, we don't have to sit down and practice handwriting or do maths in the way that the education system says. And then, oh my God, realizing, that the kids just learn to read on their own if you give them the right environment instead of trying to sit down every day and forcing them to do certain things to help them with their reading. They can actually do that on their own, and it removes stress from not only us as parents but also for the kids. And all these little affirmations that my kids can learn and become good empathetic human beings and spend hours reading without anyone getting involved. It's amazing.
I'm so glad you were here for this PWT mollycoddling debate. Our next one lands in a couple of weeks. I'll be joined by 3 more parents who'll share their opinions on another hot topic. Now, we'll be debating, should schools teach about gender identity and sexual orientation? I hope you'll join me for that. If you'd like to react in some way to something you heard, I encourage you to join the Parents Who Think Substack community. Pop the words Parents Who Think Substack into your search engine and it'll come up. Or come on over to our new YouTube page, funnily enough called Parents Who Think. Thanks for being such a great supporter of the show, and tune in next time for more valuable conversations from Parents Who Think. Take care.